Hi everyone, we're going to get started on our public meeting. This is our second meeting in a series of meetings we're hosting on issues and concerns specific to each lake. This is the Sanford Lake meeting. On Monday we had a meeting updates. If you're interested in that information, the recording of that will be posted on our website under the meetings tab. If you're interested in information on Seacourt or Smallwood Lake, you can find the information on when that will be and call-in info under the meetings tab on our website. Okay, so due to COVID, we're holding this meeting virtually, but we will allow for public questions and comments. We received some comments and questions via email prior to this meeting, and we believe we've structured the presentation to address a lot of those concerns that we've received. For questions and comments that we did not get to, we're working on getting through those. Our communications team is working on them, and they'll continue to get through them in the coming days. If you have questions or comments that you've not yet submitted, using the questions feature and go to webinar, and then we will answer as many public questions as we're able to get to for the final 30 minutes of this presentation. I'll turn it over to Dave Kepler.
Okay. And what do you? I'll do it. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. As Kayla said, this is a review of the project and where we are, but focused on the Sanford Dam. So questions and answers are very open to general Four Lakes Task Force questions, but also we want to focus on this dam, not the other dams and stuff to work through. So we're going to have basically two discussion topics today, kind of a reconstruction concept update that was reviewed at the public board meeting webinar, but focused on Sanford, and that'll be done by Ron Hansen, and then erosion control update that will be done by Terry Tram, who's leading that effort for us, for folks around specifically around Sanford. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron Hansen from the Spicer Group.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ron Hansen with the Spicer Group. So what we want to do is give a recap of the reconstruction estimate summary for the Sanford Dam. So as you, if you were in the last board meeting, this is somewhat similar to what we presented at that point in time, but in general, after the May 19th event, the Four Lakes Task Force hired GEI Consulting to prepare a report for planning purposes, and Spicer Group and Essex Partnership provided input and review on that report. The full report is posted on the Four Lakes Task Force website and contains a great level of detail. We're just going to summarize it here today. It's important to understand that the report is for planning level purposes only, and it includes design concepts. As we move forward, obviously detailed engineering will be required and additional studies will be required, and things will get updated as we go. But the initial assumptions that were made when the report was prepared is that the Sanford Dam will require a full reconstruction. So that means we would be looking at new spillways, new gates, and essentially a new embankment. Another important assumption is that the reconstruction of the Sanford Dam at this point in time, as it's outlined in the report, does not include hydropower. So simply put, the concepts and the estimates are to put a dam back without hydroelectric generation. This initial assumption is based on economics. Obviously, it's going to be more expensive to rebuild hydro, and then the amount of time that it would take. This does not mean that hydro is completely off the table, but at this point in time, it's not included with the restoration assumptions. Several other important factors for design criteria as the dam, Sanford Dam and all the dams are being considered. We're looking to to make sure the dams have a 75+ year service life. So doing things like replacing deteriorated concrete and using new design standards. We want to make sure that the dams do meet the current standard of practice for dam engineering. And then another design assumption is that the dams would pass half of the probable maximum flood. And this is a flow rate, the probable maximum flood. So the concepts for the reconstruction of the Sanford Dam in general, the existing powerhouse and existing gated spillway structure and concrete would be demolished, and a new facility would be constructed. The new facility would include construction of a primary spillway, and within that primary spillway there would be gates, and we're looking at 6 22-foot wide, most likely Obermeyer gates. We would also look to have the primary spillway constructed to pass the 100-year storm event. We're also looking at raising, reconstructing, and repairing the embankment. And an important part of that is inclusion of a sheet pile cutoff wall through the entire length of the embankment. And then also looking at the dam having new auxiliary spillways. And at this point, we're estimating a 165-foot long labyrinthine spillway. So let's talk about the gates. In this picture, you'll see a typical detail of a gate. For those of you that have seen the gates on the dam, the older gates were what we referred to as radial gates, and they would be operated by hoisting them up or lifting them up. We're looking to remove those gates and install new press gates. The primary difference is these gates fold down, so they're more fail-safe. So when we're looking at this picture, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, these are examples of the gate styles that are being looked at for Sanford Dam, crest gate details. And you can see that in the lower picture there are 2 gates. One gate is lowered to the point that water is passing, and then the other gate is raised up and holding water back. And you can see how the gates fold down and that there are hydraulic arms on each side of the gate, so they still would be manually lowered and raised. And this is what we would call the primary spillway gates. So the primary spillway gates that you see in the last picture, those are operated to manage the lake levels on a day-to-day basis, and also are storms of lesser magnitude. When storms of greater magnitude come, we would also have what we call an auxiliary spillway. Now typically an auxiliary spillway would not function on a day-to-day basis, but would only function during large storm events. Auxiliary spillways are what we call passive spillways, meaning operation of gates is not required. They just automatically work when water levels become high enough. So for the Sanford Dam, we're looking at a labyrinth spillway, and there's a picture of that in the upper right-hand corner. And then finally, so there's 3 components: the primary spillway, day-to-day operations, the auxiliary spillway, which kicks in during high storm events, and then there's the embankment. Some key issues are items in the embankment design. The number 1 item would be the blue line that you see in the middle of this illustration. Right now we're planning on the new embankment having a tile cutoff wall for the entire length of the embankment. What a sheet pile cutoff wall does is it helps deter and reduce the amount of water that seeps through the dam. So it essentially enhances the safety factor for the embankment. So you would have a sheet pile cutoff wall in the middle. That's the concept. And then on the downstream side of the sheet pile cutoff wall, you would also have a drainage layer of a filter drain and then a toe drain, and that's highlighted in yellow on this map. So the idea is that some amount of water will seep through the dam, and we want to collect that water in the drainage system, have it filter through the stone, go to a toe drain, and then that toe drain would allow the water to discharge to the river. And then finally, there's the embankment itself. That would be dirt, earth, and fill that would be placed on the upstream side and the downstream side of the cutoff wall. Those would be placed at, slopes of 2.5 on one, 2.5 feet horizontally, 1 feet vertical, and a top width of the embankment at 20 feet. So when we look at what it takes to reconstruct the dam so that the dam can pass the half PMF, and again, these are planning level opinions of cost. They're outlined in more detail on the report on the website, but the reconstruction costs for Sanford Dam are currently estimated at $91 million. So this would exceed the state requirements. It would allow for the passage of the half PMF. These things are very preliminary at this point. As I mentioned early on, detailed engineering and studies have to be completed, so there is a confidence range on this cost estimate, meaning that it could be 30% below the 91 million and up to 50% higher than the 91 million. But the 91 million right now does include your site investigations, your dam safety permitting, your construction management, your engineering, and there is some contingency in that. So there are factors that could make the cost increase. There are factors that could have the cost decrease. All of these factors will be evaluated as we move forward, but just to have the discussion, for example, if the dam were to be required to pass the full PMF, that would increase the cost because we would need to build additional spillway capacity. As we're moving forward, we're also doing flood studies, and there's a concept called the inflow design flood, which could result in a decreasing of the cost. As we look at the Sanford Dam, you can see right now, too, the initial assumption is to have an earthen embankment with a sheet pile cutoff wall. If it's determined that the entire embankment needs to be armored, this could increase the cost. And then how flood protection for the downstream communities as well as the upstream communities is handled could have an impact on the cost. As everybody's aware, there's also a forensic investigation, and we're awaiting the findings of that, and that could identify operational or physical measures that could impact the cost. We're also going through a value engineering exercise with the intent of optimizing the design and reducing cost. And then there's environmental restoration that needs to be considered as well. So that is sort of the update on the cost estimate and the concepts for the restoration of the Sanford Dam. At this point, turn it over to Terry Cram, who is going to give an update on the ongoing erosion control activities. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ron, and good afternoon, everyone. As Ron said, my name is Terry Cram, and I've been working with erosion around the lakes and trying to identify some of the issues that we're seeing and working with the landowners to try to remedy some of these situations. Before I forget, I would like to let you know that you might want to have a pen and pencil available. I do have some email addresses and some phone numbers that you might want to jot down. So if you can get one of those handy, that would be good. So what we've been doing is our Four Lakes Task Force volunteers have kind of been traveling around the different lakes, looking at the different erosion concerns for the landowners, and basically working with them, giving them some ideas on how to remedy or mitigate some of these erosion issues. We've also been, the Four Lakes Task Force has hosted 2 engineering fairs. One was in Midland, the other was in Gladwin County. What we did at those fairs was we did collect some data on the properties that had some erosion damage and entered that data into the Midland County GIS system. If you attended one of those fairs and spoke to an engineer, your property has already been entered into the GIS system. So what we'll be doing is, as I said, what we've been doing is the Four Lakes Task Force volunteers have been going out to the homeowners and looking at their properties for erosion. What we found is that we've got many sites to evaluate and not enough volunteers. We've got limited volunteers to really go out to see these sites. So we've kind of changed our strategy, and we've switched to having the NRCS go out directly and inspecting those properties directly, as opposed to sending out the volunteers. Now, when the NRCS does come out and look at your property, they may or may not be able to give you an idea of if your property may be eligible even at that time. It's something that it just depends on how complex and how complicated the project would be. But once that eligibility does get determined, then what we will do is the Four Lakes volunteers will then work with the property owners once the Four Lakes Task Force has the plans and the cost estimates in place. And if you did not get a chance to go out to either the Midland or the Gladwin County erosion fair, and you do have erosion concerns, if you've not contacted the Four Lakes Task Force, please do so as soon as you can. I do have a couple of ways that you can do that. The preferred method of communication would be via email, which would be at Kayla S, that's Kaylas at Four Lakes, and the four is spelled F-O-U-R, lakestaskforce.org. In your email, please send us your name and your address and your phone number, and then just give us a general idea of what your concerns are, what your erosion concerns are, so that we can have an idea before we send the NRCS out to look. If you do not have access to a computer, you may also call 989-941-3005. But we do ask that if you do have access to a computer, email would be the preferred way to go. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to be paying for these projects. Work on preliminary engineering cost estimates has already started on some of the early projects. And what we're going to be doing is the NRCS will have a 75-25% cost sharing, where the NRCS will pick up 75% of the project cost, and the homeowner will be responsible for the 25%. So the homeowner should be prepared to pay 25% of the erosion expenses. What we're planning on doing there is we are putting in cost estimates that are intentionally high so that we do cover the entire project, cost of the project. If we do have some leftover funds afterwards, what we'll do is refund that money back to the homeowner. But also, if there are expenses that go over and above the homeowner will also be responsible, or I should say the property owner should be responsible for that funding. Neighborhoods can work together in order to raise these funds. So if you have multiple houses that are, or multiple properties next to each other that are all facing the same type of erosion issues, you can work together to get those funds raised. Just to give you an idea, and this is a general ballpark to get you in give you an idea of how much these things might cost. What they are going to be is they could range. It depends on the extent of the project, but they could go anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000, and that's just an estimate right now, just to give you an idea of what to expect and get you in the ballpark. If you're looking at thinking that, boy, I'm not sure I'm going to have the funds for that, there are some low interest rate funds available through the SBA, which, what does that stand for? Small Business Association loans. And just for your information, the NRCS is the Natural Resources Conservation Services. So if you do have, if you are interested in an SBA loan, what you can do is call the SBA at the 3 different numbers that you see on the screen, 571-422-8013 or 571-422-6016. And the third option is 571-422-0331. Now keep in mind that the SBA application deadline is going to be September 4th, and that's right around Labor Day. So if you feel that you are going to be in need of a loan, and I don't believe there is a cost associated with the application for that loan, you might want to consider the SBA putting in an application for a loan. The last item to be aware of is that these SBA loans are only available to primary homeowners. So if your home on your property is a secondary home, that home would not be available or eligible for the SBA application loan. And that's what I had for erosion today. I'd like to turn it over now back to Dave Kepler for the Q&A portion of the program.
Thank you, Terry. So what kind of questions do we have, Kayla?
So you're going to have to repeat the questions because they can't see it, Kayla.
Okay, can't see Kayla. Okay.
So what happens with the federal disaster declaration and is the Army Corps of Engineers getting involved?
Okay, so what is happening with the federal disaster declaration and the Corps of Army Engineers getting involved? So yes, they are, but I think for clarity we should point out a few things. One is FEMA really doesn't cover any of the aspects related to the lake bottom or the dams, primarily because they're private infrastructure. That's been one of the issues. So while there's support for homeowners, that isn't covered by FEMA. And the Army Corps of Engineers can work on navigable water that is, again, not in private infrastructure. So really the scope of what the Army Corps can do in terms of the emergency is related really to what's south of the Sanford Dam on public property. So that's one of the challenges we have when we look at erosion and tying into that to drive. So unfortunately, those organizations are there to deal with public infrastructure with homeowners. It doesn't deal with this issue of erosion on the lakes and stuff to work with. And that's one of the reasons, but also the NRCS, as Terry pointed out, is the agency that really gets involved with this activity going forward too, because they manage that. So one of the things FEMA does is coordinate all the organizations, and this is what we've been connected up with. And the good news is it covers 75%. The challenge is it doesn't cover all of it, and that's what we're working through now as we go forward. We are also looking to work with the Army Corps on future things which anticipation of us acquiring the property they will be able to do. And so that's what we're kind of working through. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, two questions. One is how are we going to clean up debris, and then is this a good time to get rid of stumps? So the debris is one of the projects we're doing specifically for Sanford. Let's just cover those. Is the Edenville Dam has a lot of debris, and we've got a project submitted for NRCS on that. We have a project submitted for debris cleanup on the Sanford Dam, but not on the bottomlands yet, or we're kind of working through that now. But that will be one of the projects we submit.
It's eligible, yeah.
Yeah, it's eligible. So that'll be one we submit, and then we're working with the state. So one of the challenges in this is this gap between 75% coverage and the 25% coverage. And we're working with the state to find funding. We're working with the county to see if there's any kind of reserve they have. It's pretty limited. And then what we can do in Four Lakes Task Force is as much as we can. So all our representatives know all the issues and all the allocations, so we're trying to work through that at this point in time. The stumps are fixed to the bottomland, and it's a lake, and so the Eagle is going to continue to treat that as a lake legally. That's a good thing. We want them to do that. And so removing things like stumps and structure from the bottomland is not something that is going to be easy to do right now in the structure. So that's not something we're looking at doing. We are looking at, we see coming up, and we are looking at addressing some of that, but a lot of the vegetation, we want to get the right vegetation in the right spots, so we're looking at that as well.
Are there things that do to help bring the lakes back quicker other than donate money, like allowing political leaders or government entities?
Yeah, so can you help besides just giving us money? Money really helps. But lobbying, yeah, I think if you support to your elected officials, I would say that we are very much engaged. And so with especially the state representatives and state senator that are related, Senator Jim Stamas as the state senator, and we're very connected with John Molinar, has been very supportive, as has Senator Stabenow. So I think sending letters of encouragement and support, because those are the folks we're funding, and actually thanking for them for their support, and just expressing that we look forward to them continuing to support us would be a good thing.
People have heard this in the movement to not want to rebuild the dams. Is there anything that they could do to help prevent this, and what are we doing?
Yeah, so the question is there a movement to not rebuild the dams? There is, I think one of the things I would be very transparent on is very critical that we keep the legal lake levels in place, and it's very critical that we start to have a program that's actually pushing, and you saw our timetable, that we plan to rebuild these lakes. And the more we can get accelerated on this, to have a plan in front of the county by March, that kind of first quarter window, and that we are actually able to get interim funding and stuff to work through, is important. And so there'll be a bias the longer you wait to kind of start to think about them differently. But right now we have a legal lake level, and we need to show that we're making progress towards that, and then I think things will be okay. So when you do write your letter, you should point out that it's your desire and expectation that we want a lake level back in place to do that. I think we have visibility for that, but I think it's important to continue to communicate that to people and stuff.
Can lakefront homeowners assist in the debris removal process of debris from their home?
Yes, so the question is, what can a homeowner do? I'll bring the experts in when I do. What can they do as it relates to debris and stuff to do, as long as you're not putting, as long as you're not pulling things out of the ground in terms of like natural things. I think as long as you have legal access to the lake, you don't have legal ability to modify the lake, but you can certainly pick up debris off the lake bottom that's in front of your house and have access to it. And we are trying to organize some of that as we go forward. So picking up debris is fine. And in our website for the erosion, there's been some discussions about what you can do on your own to work on. We would only ask if it starts to involve large equipment, then it's important that we get a hold harmless on that and that make sure the contractor is licensed, and especially if you're going to do modifications to things like seawalls, and many of those things don't need a permit, but as you start to do other things, they may need a permit. So, but basically we've had agreement that just the normal things to repair your wall, put vegetation down, all that's explained that the homeowners can do to start to prevent things.
How will voices and impact the speed at which FLTF can flood the dams?
So how will Boyce's bankruptcy affect the speed of how FLT or how Four Lakes Task Force can to acquire the dam? So there's two lawsuits underway. One is a condemnation process and one is a bankruptcy process. There's a lot of noise about it. That too. A lot of discussion about that. If you look at it, he hasn't put the property yet into bankruptcy. He's put the operating company in bankruptcy, so that he's got 6 or 7 things here. So it's going to go through a series of structure. We assume this would take a few months, so we are actively engaged in the discussion on the bankruptcy and have lawyers involved, and on the condemnation. So I think those two things will get together. We see this as when you read the narrative, Boyce does not feel that he has that. Basically, his position is this is kind of a force majeure. He's kind of not his issue, so he's kind of fighting this a little bit. But we'll work through that. And our expectation is we will have the control of the property and able to do the debris cleanup one way or the other. That's what we're trying to work through.
Okay, so this is a question on the erosion issue. For people to know if they need an SBA loan, will they know the estimate for NRCS money prior to the 9-year deadline? And how do they know if they should loan?
Yeah, so repeat the question. Let me get my foot on.
Yeah, the question was if you do need a loan, how will you know if you need a loan? Will you know what the cost estimate is for the project ahead of time? And the answer to that is we're going to have some of the earlier projects are going to be starting and approved next week. But if you are one of the later projects, it could go as late as into the end of the year to know the approval. So you may or may not know what that cost is going to be ahead of time, and that's why I was thinking that it might be a good idea just to apply for that SBA loan, since there isn't a cost associated with that. But when you talk with the NRCS when they're out on your property, they might be able to give you an idea of this a small, medium, or large project, just to kind of get you in the ballpark to give you an idea of what it might cost so that you could then apply for that loan.
Yeah, Terry, we would be open to helping them kind of come up with a high-level estimate. So
yeah,
we kind of factor.
Yes.
Yeah. So
the Four Lakes Task Force would be open to kind of giving you an estimate as to the cost of what that might be as well. So that could be something that you could contact us for to get that information.
Also, what I've seen is that the SBA loan application is to determine if you're qualified for a loan, but you don't have to tell them how much you want to borrow.
So Dave Rothman just pointed out that when you apply for the SBA loan, it is really just an application to get approved for the loan. You don't have to specify how much that loan is for. That's a real good point. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a question, has Four Lakes Task Force adding a village to ballot in the counties to help pay for the camps?
Okay, the question is, have we considered adding a millage to the county to pay? That we've considered a lot of things, and that may be one that we this point in time, there's two things with a millage or an assessment. You have to have a more defined number to actually get that. So our first wave would be to get interim financing that doesn't put a burden. It puts a commitment, but not a burden on the county, a short-term burden on the county or a special assessment district. Part 307 basically works under the view that primary or last resort financing is a special assessment district. So we're going to have to do a couple things. One is finance this as if it was going to go through the special assessment, and then look at the affordability and value, and frankly negotiate with other sources in terms of, can we get grants? Can we get, for some of the communities that would have problems paying for this assessment, can we get it covered? Will there be appropriations federally and state to do that? What aspects of the operations could the county pay for in general, and what aspects are the, could we look at that? In general, I would tell you a millage is not really on the commissioners' minds either in Midland or Gladwin, because they have a limited budget open to that, and frankly the tax impact is pretty significant of these lakes going down, so the idea that they have to get a millage to bring it back up would be very challenging. It's very unusual. It's done for lakes, but it's a challenge. So I think the first key thing we have to do over the next 6 months is get a plan together, understand the assessment impact, and then understand the affordability to each lake community, and determine how we can get funds to get the project affordable as we go forward. We have plans around all those, but we don't have answers. But one of the areas is, whether we do a millage or not, that there's certain services that, as this becomes part of the county's ownership, that there's some costs that they could take over to absorb that. We haven't had any of those discussions with the county, but we will.
What kind of flood protection measures are being considered to protect downstream communities?
So the question is, what kind of flood protection for downstream communities? There's a few things to think about as we go downstream. First of all, I don't know if most people recognize it, but when you get into Midland and think of the Tittabawassee going through downtown in the pictures, about 40% of that water comes from the Tittabawassee through the Sanford Dam, if I could describe that. So through 4 lake systems with the Tobacco and Tittabawassee converging and then going through the Sanford Dam, and the rainfall associated with about 40% of what comes through Midland. The rest of it comes from other rivers coming in and other rainfall coming in that creates that flood. So the first thing we're going to do is first of all, and it's an unacceptable answer to have a dam fail like this, and that is one of the things we're working on. So as we develop a design and flood management model, we're going to look at that and assess how it impacts Midland, and make sure that's why we have the money and the safety side, but also understand how the dam impacts Midland. Intuitively, if you think about it, the dams basically, plus or minus feet, the water that goes through those dams are going to be the water that goes through Midland. So we are working with the Army Corps of Engineers and the City of Midland and the County of Midland and other stakeholders to have them do a whole flood study south of the Sanford Dam, and so we do the flood study first, and then there's an opportunity to work with them on an assisted plan to look at mitigation as well. And mitigation could be a lot of things, just in terms of emergency response and property zoning, or it could be looking at things like diversion and levees and everything else. That's honestly probably, if we get into that phase, it's probably a multi-year project, or even just a strategy that gets into the planning process of the city and county.
What would happen if the dam is not replaced and repaired? What would happen with flooding in your mind?
Okay, so if the dam was not replaced or repaired, what would happen to flooding in Midland? So the first part of the question, we are not going to let that happen. I mean, our commitment here is we're going to have a dam. But if you look at today, and if you exclude the issue, which I know is a significant exclusion, if you exclude the issue of the fact that the that the dam broke and created a surge through the system that shouldn't be tolerated. If you look at the amount of water that goes through the system today, and when you get to a 100-year flood level, I would say that it's going to be hard to see the difference in that number, that the basins of these rivers will fill up in a day or so, I would think, Ron, and on a big high flood day. And so maybe there's a 3-foot height in the river in Midland. It might be adjusting that a foot or two kind of thing, but it's not a big deal because we don't have dams that is going to eliminate flooding in Midland. It won't.
There's a few questions about weed control on the lake bottom. People worry about weeds, invasive weeds, and trees that are starting to grow. Are there things to address that?
Yeah, so that's kind of another outcome. The question was on invasive species and weeds on the bottomlands. So we actually want vegetation on the bottomlands, but we don't want the wrong vegetation. And I know probably Wixom has a bigger problem than Sanford, but Sanford does have problems around this area. Specific issue species are things like trees, like aspen trees, I guess, or I don't know if they're poplar or aspen, but I know aspen grow 4 or 5 feet a year, so we could be sitting there with trees at this point in time. Plus, you have other species that are going to create problems when we fill up the lake. So that is something we're looking at. We are working with the weed assessment districts. Initially, there was a thought that we wouldn't need to do weed assessments, and that we would take the money in those and put them towards erosion. I think we're now looking at how we manage the weed assessments and do we need them going forward or not. That's got to be done kind of community by community. We know it's an issue and we're working on it.
What if I've already repaired my seawall and put erosion control in place and I retroactively apply for it?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the question is if I've already done work, can I retroactively ask for support? And that's one of the challenges with this system is FEMA has a budget and gets allocated, and so they kind of work on a different model than the NRCS. So in FEMA, you kind of can collect your bills and move them forward, but they don't have a highest percentage. Here we have a high percentage, but you can't do the work beforehand. And we know there's been emergency work that's had to be done before that. I know I'm working on my home, and the things we're doing aren't going to get counted in those activities. So unfortunately, they don't have a budget. They have to get approval for the budget based on these projects. So if doing projects in emergency cases and working with the owners, because they just can't wait. But no, the unfortunate thing is if you've done work, it's not going to get covered. It has to be, they have to have an engineer come out and certify that it needs to be done, understand the level of priority it needs, and then you can get the funding. So unfortunately, no.
Are people allowed to remove soil and all that slush and create sandbars?
No. So the question is as we get, especially I know as we get in these culverts and structure, can you go out there and start excavating those sandbars and culture and stuff? And the answer to that's no. We are working, the homeowner shouldn't be doing that. We are working with the NRCS to look at these culverts and structure. And I believe that's going to have to be a state issue and a county issue that we work through spending. But we can't be putting, just have a heavy equipment going out digging up the lake bottom. That has to be permitted and structured. So it has to be permitted by DNR, and it will be, but it has to be through a contractor and process. So you just can't go out there and drive your tractor out there and start digging.
How does Boyce refusing to pay for the dam investigation impact the investigation?
Yeah, so the question is how does Boyce's delay of the investigation impact our progress and stuff to do? That is a problem, and we've said that. And I think the whole idea here is that us acquiring the lakes and building this design. So it's really important that we build the design off of the known repairs that are needed, and then will this investigation inform us on that? We actually have, so Yes, if Boyce was doing what he was being asked to do by the federal and state government and he was on track, that would be very helpful. He's not, and based on his bankruptcy, he's declared he's not going to. So that he does have this thing that he has to pay the investigation, and he's kind of figuring out how to pay for that. But that's going to be a problem too. So there's not that's an issue. Now on Sanford specifically, I would say on Wixom too. These projects are so large, and we're going after this model of trying to make sure we have a long-term investment, that we believe we can do some of this in parallel. We probably won't need to be in construction, and we'll have to design around things that we may think will be reflected in the investigation. So we're hoping we can run that in parallel, but it may delay things, as we've talked about, in terms of our implementation, if we can't get the exact criteria into the engineering design. We're meeting now to figure out how to manage that. That's kind of in the Oroville situation. The state had a lot more money to do this, and they basically designed around the investigation, knowing 2 or 3 different options about what the investigation was going to select. We can't afford to do that, but since it's a major build, we think there's some assumptions we can make on embankments and stuff that we can engineer and get most of it done and keep it off our critical path. That's our objective, but it is one of the risks we're taking and stuff to do.
Okay, so people are concerned, for people that it is their second home, are there any loans or programs that they could apply to for a second home?
That's going to be through a local bank probably.
Yeah, I think what you have to do, the question is if it's your second home, how do you fund it? I think you'd have to go to the local bank and work with them, and a home equity loan or something like that to work with. And so it'd be a little higher in structure to work with it, but that would be one of the ways to do it. We're making, just to be clear, we're making every appeal possible to get funding to kind of help the homeowners out here, but that we just haven't seen that come yet, and we think people are trying to do it, but I think it's important for the homeowners not to wait for that, but to get their structure in place to make sure they can implement as they go.
Will Freeland task force be getting other estimates from other engineering firms and contractors on the cost of the dam?
Yeah, so are we going to get other estimates and structure from other engineering firms? Yes, and we're going to. So, but I want to make sure we understand that was a work preliminary opinion with design concepts in 2 weeks on a $300 million project, and so the estimate. So it's not even. It's an opinion. It's hard to even say it's an engineering estimate, and it's based on looking at basically concepts that could go in and looking at the factors of structure to do. It's got plus or minus. It's got minus 30% to plus 50%. The key for us is to get the base down in the feasibility study first. So in other words, there's assumptions. The confidence level doesn't change too much. The issue comes down into getting the feasibility study into what selections we're going to make. And so we believe we can move that number down just by making selections differently, how we do construction, and what kind of spillways we build and all that stuff. So we're going to spend the next 6 months trying to lower that number while still meeting the safety requirements, and then we will farm that out to engineering. So the engineering costs represent about 5% of the overall project cost, and so we'll look at getting the right engineers. This will be multiple groups, but the key thing is to managing the scope and the value and the selections we make, and then we will go out to construction. So we really need to figure out how to get $100 million out of this system, either through engineering or costs, through financing, or through grants. So that's kind of what we're working on.
If and when the dams are replaced, who will be responsible for monitoring the new legal levels and evaporation.
Okay, so if and when the lakes get replaced, and so when the lakes get replaced, we're just going to think about that for the next 4 months. It's about getting these lakes back up, and then we, I think, have to go to the community at that time and say, here's what it costs, here's what it does, and make decisions. But the counties will own the lake levels, or will own the dams, and own the lake bottoms, and own the property, all the property associated with the lakes. And so the county drives that, and the funding, ultimate funding for that of operations will come from the Special Assessment District, and the Four Lakes Task Force will be responsible for operating it. That has two ways to do it. Some of those services might be negotiated with the county. Some of those services may be third party, or we may look at running a small operations here to operate the dams. Those are the things we're looking at. But the running for the next 2 years, will probably, those dams still need to be operated and stuff. Those are the things we're looking at and haven't really made a determination yet. So we go.
How long will it take for
How much what?
How long will it take for the condemnation?
So how long does it take for the condemnation to be completed? Boy, if I had that answer, I'd let you know. But it's not a year. It's measured in months. So the way the condemnation works is basically the county has approved it. We have provided an offer to Boyce. Boyce didn't accept that offer. So then we basically informed Boyce that we were going to take the property on behalf of the county, and we filed for the necessity to do that. So he can challenge in necessity, but that doesn't usually hold up very well. It's a judge thing, and it's a necessity to move, and so we think that may take a week or two. And then at that point in time, so the view would be condemnation would be measured in a few months here, not in an extended period of time. What Boyce has the option to do, and any private property does, if a government takes money, you can argue with the price that was set. So it's very highly probable, if you read the bankruptcy, that he's going to want to sue for a better price than we're giving him. But that issue is different than, we'll have the property by then. We've actually technically already identified with the counties the properties we have, and have placed the taking on that, and we just need to file a suit to transfer it over. And once that happens, then we'll tie it in. There's a little complications with the bankruptcy, but I would say my guess would be in the next 2 months, within 90 days, I would say would be my estimate. That's an estimate, and I just want to be transparent, but not accurate. Yeah.
Will all 4 dams be fixed or none get fixed? Is it an all or nothing? Possible 3 out of 4 would get fixed?
Right now, we are targeting all 4 of them to get fixed. It seems it's very feasible that Secord and Smallwood, within their assessment districts, could get their, within the assessment district and the property owners around that an assessment model, if the lake owners that are associated with that lake pay for it, those lakes will be able to be repaired and come up within an affordability model. I think Sanford and Wixom are challenged. Sanford and Wixom will be easier to build if we do it together, because, in an engineering way. And so our point is there'll be different affordability models on different lakes, and we're going to have a discussion with the lake community on how much the price will be paid. So it's better for us to do them together because we save a lot of cost doing it, and ultimately the legal lake level's there, so technically we have to do it, and then we're going to have to figure out the affordability and how to offset that.
So that's another question. Has an affordability amount been set for individual property owners?
So has a affordability model been set for different property owners? And no, it hasn't. We've looked at the reality, and what we're trying to do is when you look at this 70, so an assessment district isn't based on what the person can afford. It's based on what it costs to do and how the costs are going to be shared. And so we can't do it on affordability. What we can do is work with some of the townships and look at grants that could get there that are, say, maybe in a different type of, that maybe qualify for federal grants and stuff to help them support the lake structure and lower their specific assessment based on need and stuff to work through. So we're trying to find, first of all, what it takes to get affordability, how much can we get from the governments, if you will, federal and state outside of that system to lower the cost. And can we do that as a system, or are we going to have to do it community by community, and we'll look at that to do.
What should somebody do if they can't afford to get an additional loan right now?
I think they should come to us and we can help them. I don't know if we can, you know, one of the choices will have to be is some of these are kind of like high priority things, and so I think there's a real need. We'll try to work with you on what kind of sources there are at. But at that point, if there's a project and there's people that can't pay for it, and we don't get extra government coming in, then it's, you know, frankly, it's probably not going to get done. But we want to make sure that happens. So I think we're trying to work and look at every contact that we have to compete. By the way, if people are on the phone and they want to volunteer to help in this, because the guys here are working, but we don't have a big staff to go through this. So if you're really interested in kind of going through this and have some resources or experience in any aspect of helping folks get loans or kind of working on this, send your notes into Kayla and we'll get you lined up. We've got a team out there, but it's honestly about just kind of connecting with people and volunteering and moving in. So we're really looking for that, and we need to cry out to people as we go.
So what is the plan? Is there a place where if the funding amount can't be reached and it's determined that we go to the dance farm affordable?
Boy, you guys are really, is there a plan if the dams are not affordable? So, I mean, I'm sitting here trying to make them affordable. So if you look at Sanford itself, it's got 2,000 people on it, it's got a $100 million problem. And so one of the ways to make it affordable is instead of doing 20 years, you do 40 years. And can we get the interest rate really low? Can we get the project rate below $92 million? Can we start to look at, and so probably for that dam at the end in terms of an assessment, we should be able to get something in there that works. I feel like Sanford's in kind of like the yellow zone, that it's within the ability of the community and the state without a big federal government to work on it. And so I just feel like the big issue here I want to make sure I make clear with everybody is not the affordability right now, it's the time. The affordability discussion will really know better in March when we see what kind of money we've got forward. If we don't have a clear plan to get this engineering in place and keep the lake levels positioned, that's our focus. I mean, so we're focusing on affordability, but right now there's like the major priority here is to get enough funding to get this engineering study done so we can make the thing affordable, and that we'll have 2 or 3 years to go deal with this funding. But if we don't get this organized to have a real plan in place that we can put in front of the community that says this is kind of where it's going to be, and we have people starting to push back on whether whether the lake level's right, then we're going to be in trouble. But right now, our big goal here is to clean up the problems we have with the federal funding and get people to, and work together to find that last 25%. And we need about $10 or $20 million to go get all this study done. That can come over a couple of years because we can stage the work. And so then we can get the affordability study. If we don't get to this, then doesn't matter if it's affordable or not. But our focus is to get this down, is to get all this stuff done in the next 6 months.
On controlling rain runoff erosion, do people need to apply to EGLE and drain commissioners to get permits to install catch basins or depression piles?
Yeah, so what you can do probably without a permit, but you can call us and check the things, is you can put erosion mats down, you can put vegetation down, you can put rocks kind of around your seawall to work on. You can't start putting you can take drain tiles off of your seawall and run the drain tiles over the vegetation. That's not a big problem to run it over the curb, but if we're talking about when you have your, rain, your 6-inch drain tiles, if you want to run that over. But if you've got like in my house, there's a culvert, I can't run a 3-foot drain tile into the river. So you can't do that. That is going to be one of these projects that we have to get engineered. We hope that if it's a city, county, the challenge we have, to be clear, is the county system stops at the before it gets to the lake water. So we got to get the county and stuff to work on how we run into a river system while it's a river system, not just feeding it to the lake bottom. But all those culverts are part of the project that hopefully we can get to. So many of those we'll just see how we can manage it.
What will happen with property assessments and taxes?
So the question is, do we know what's going to go on with property assessment and taxes? We have kind of, as a position, have kind of said we're not going to really answer that question. The county obviously recognizes that this is there's going to be a change in the tax numbers that they have to figure out, and they're in that process now.
Okay, we're just about done. Somebody had a comment that it seems that there's a lot of government agencies that have a lot of restrictions on this, but now a lot of agencies offering money.
Yeah. So there's a comment of there's a lot of government agencies that offer a lot of help but not a lot of money. A couple of challenges is almost every federal assistance program is assuming that the local community is going to pay for something. That's how every one of them is built. And most of them are built so you can't double dip. And so if FEMA pays for it, the Army Corps is not going to pay for it. Or if FEMA pays for it, NCRS isn't going to pay for it. So I think for the erosion side of this, we have actually a very rich program relative to what other agencies get. So the good news is 75%. The bad news is we have $20 million of work to do, and so there's a $4 or $5 million gap. We feel the state's going to deal with most of the dam issues. Boise should be dealing with all of this, but with the dam issues, and then we're going to have to deal with this erosion, and we're working through all the state agencies in ways that Four Lakes Task Force can potentially get some grants and money and to offset the owner cost, but we're kind of stuck on that. So no, it's the way the system works, and I'm not here to defend it. I'm just telling you that all these emergencies expect a local input, and a lot of the burden at the end goes on the homeowners. And we're done. So thank you for the questions. They were all, I think, focused and good, and I would just summarize kind of at the end of the questions is that we get that affordability is a critical issue here. We get that it's expensive to replace, and the good news is we have a lake level established. We are going to hold on to that, and we're going to develop a feasible plan by early next year to have a viewpoint of that. And in the meantime, we got to work through these kind of erosion issues and stuff to manage through, and that's what our goal is. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for watching, and make sure you hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next videos I will be posting, and leave your questions, comments, and suggestions below. As always, I just want to give a massive thanks to the people who support me on Patreon. Never underestimate the value of your contribution to keeping this channel going. Thank you.